So if we start with the future sales, the first one, as I mentioned, is the calculate minimum. So I'm actually just going to run this for one of our product groups and then just talk through as I run it what's actually happening here. So at the moment, it's actually analyzing the last rolling 13 weeks usage. Now, usage equals is anything where you've dispatched it from a sales order. If you're doing internal issues, then again, that's classed as usage. So I appreciate at the moment we're not doing a lot of exhibitions and that because of obvious reasons, but should that change and you take samples or there's customer samples or anything, as you do an internal issue, that's usage. So of course you want to track that to make sure you've got coverage. Now, if you are seasonal, you can then put a date range in the past. So for example, if it was a 12, 14 week lead time, I'd probably be looking at September now of last year, and it would then base it on that period. Or I might look at September to December, so quarter 4, and it's going to base the calculation on that quarter to give us an average monthly demand. So within that product group, it's showing us all of the stock items, but also listing all the warehouses listed against those. And really you're looking for the big swings. So the stuff in the middle, don't need to change it. And it's not going to force you to change, it's just giving you a suggestion. So if we take the top one here, we've got a current minimum stock level of 100, but the system's suggesting we change that to 0. And if we look, the last rolling 13 weeks, we've had no demand, but actually over the last 2 years, we've had no demand either. So the issue with having it as 100 is when we run material planning, that's going to look and say, right, okay, your current free stock, as we can see, is 0. We've got a minimum level of 100, so we need to order 100 in to bring us back to the minimum. That's the logic of what it's doing and what you want it to do. So of course we don't want to hold 100 because we never sell it. So in this instance, we can just simply adjust and accept that, and by ticking that and updating, it's going to adjust it to 0. So we'll essentially buy to order. If we flip that round, we can see, for example, here, it's suggesting we increase that to 118. So if we scroll along, we can see the average monthly demand is just under 110. So this is Sage's standard view monthly trading figures, but we have enhanced it. So against your sales analysis, we give you some graphical representation. If I come into usage, brilliant, managed to pick, let's try that again. Let's try this one here. Well, I've actually got some figures. There you go. I'm just going to click on it properly. There's your phasing in terms of the details. Now that's great. I can see ramps up to April and it dropped off in May. But really, what I want to do is I want to look over the last two years as well and start to have a look at that usage with the phasing. Is that a usual spike? Do we normally see kind of quarterly spikes? Again, there's no substitute, in my opinion, for your market experience, your industry knowledge. So this is just presenting that for you to make that decision. Now, how it's worked the calculation out down here is as follows. So the average demand per month is usage plus lost orders. Now, lost orders is a feature that's in the SOP management piece, and that enables a salesperson they've got the customer on the phone, you haven't got any stock, you've said we can get it in 3 weeks time, and they've said, no, that was too long, we'll go elsewhere. So I can record that line as a lost order. I can say, okay, the lead time was too long or no stock, and you can choose which ones would then be included in that calculation. So again, just taking that into consideration. The working days in the month, in the background of the system, I've set that to 21 days, so you can override that within each company. So within each Sage company is what I mean. So it gives us our average daily demand. Now the stock coverage, so the lead time from the preferred supplier, so again, it's looking at the preferred supplier, it's 15 days, multiplying that, so we want a 50% coverage. So we're saying we want 22.5 days worth of stock coverage. So with all of that calculated, gives us a minimum stock forecast of 118 with rounding. Now you can override the safety margin, so that's what's set in the background. You can override it on a supplier. You can override it on a stock item as well. So if perhaps a supplier is more or less reliable, you can then adjust that. So perhaps we just want a 10% coverage from that preferred supplier, or for that particular stock item, we need 3 times the coverage just because it's difficult to get hold of at certain times. So that's how it's basing it. You then just select the ones that you want to update the minimum levels, and that of course has then changed it. The other way of looking at it is a sales order forecast. So within a date range is essentially just, and I'll just run this for all of the stock items. I should have probably filtered that by one, but it's looking, you see the transaction type, it's looking for any write-offs, sales orders, BOM or works order issues. So that's the Sicon works order issue, but again, if you've consumed them in the bill of materials. And what that's going to do is eventually, if I was to generate the forecast, that drops into material planning just over here, and you've got a manual forecast that you can include. And in good old Blue Peter fashion, here's one that I prepared earlier. So based on the system suggesting, and there's a calculation that it does based on the last 3 months, what percentage should it increase? It's then suggesting sales or usage figures, and material planning will then pick this up and suggest what you need to order to cover those figures. So it's a slightly different way of working. I'd say it's probably quite niche. The vast majority will use the first option that I went through. But yeah, I should have just filtered that for a single stock item, schoolboy error, but that will be finished in just a moment. But essentially what it does is it's going to then list all of the items and the historical sales or transactions, any of those items across those months. You will get a bit of highlighting as well. So for example, and this is where Sicon help and user guides are fantastic. So if you come into the Sicon website, into distribution, you go into the help and user guide, and if I go into future sales, all of the bits that I'm talking about are within here. So if I go into the sales order forecast, got screenshots and descriptions, but what you may get are somewhere they're highlighted in red. Now you do need a minimum of 10 sort of transactions within that month for it to do this analysis. But what it can bring back is kind of analyzing, saying, well, okay, well, the average across there is, kind of around, say, 40, 30, 40, 450 is an obvious spike. So you've got the choice there to, as a once-off, just override that and then kind of flatten that curve. Or you can click on the exclusions and say, just exclude that sales order. That's an anomaly, so don't base any calculations on that particular item. And what you've also got, as you can see, there's a bit of graphical. As you click down on the lines, we can start to see the volume of sales orders, works orders, and write-offs as well. So if I come back into here, it's nearly finished. So I'll let that just finish itself off. But yeah, in terms of the screenshots, I think this is just great. It means you don't have to register. You can actually go through there. You can create a forecast, and then if you generate your forecast within the system, it then drops it into that screen as we've seen before. So there's two ways of being able to look at that. So yeah, bringing this back, if I just shrink that down, so I've got the go to meeting thing on the right hand side. Yeah, if we just scroll down to where we've got some sales, for example, what we can do is, as I click down into this, there we can start to see that phase, and we can see a trend line as well. I can tick the ones that I want to generate a forecast. I viewed a forecast before, so there was one I prepared earlier, worked out what the forecast changed, but I could have overridden that. There's the future figures, and when I generated my MRP, it dropped it in, ready for MRP to pick it up. Which leads us quite nicely onto material planning. Now, again, I just ran that one earlier. You can see what it took, just under 2 minutes. So we do put the start and end time. You can run this as many times as you want, but it will overwrite the previous suggestion. You don't have to kick anybody out of Sage. So what it does is it deletes the previous, takes a snapshot, and then runs through the 3 different types of POs that you can have. So based on the fulfillment method of the sales order, are we going to distribute this from stock? Are we going to tell the supplier just to ship it straight from them to the customer, or the supplier via stock, so essentially bounces in, we've got a wagon waiting and bounces out? We do split those suggestions out just to keep things nice and clear for you.